Yes, welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind NRL Physio, all the stuff you see on socials. My co-host, James, he is here. It's good to have you on a Sunday night, mate. But look, a couple of things. We've spoken last week at length about our feelings about the Queensland team and its prospects for this Wednesday night. It's a little bit concerning, to say the least. But, mate, I got to throw it to you. The Bronx, what's doing? Like, they are right on the precipice. I mean, my big thing is that Billy Walters is still starting a 9 when we all saw what Blake Moser could do on Saturday night. Like, something's got to change there, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're both tough pills to swallow, Brian, and we'll keep it very honest here because that's what we do on the Magic Sponge. We're full of integrity and honesty here. It's very apprehensive days for yours truly as a Broncos and Maroons fan. There's some questionable coaching decisions floating around. I don't know where Cam Smith is in all this. I really need Cam Smith to show his face in Queensland camp just to put me at ease, because between now and Wednesday, Brian, I am very, very nervous. And until I see Cam Smith in a Maroons kit, then I won't feel safe. So please, Smithy, if you're listening, as a fervent listener of the Sponge, please be in camp this week. Please disregard your son's coaching for whatever you're doing with him and step up for the state and get back to the Maroons.
We need it, mate. There's a lot of things we need this week, and the first one is a big Queensland victory, hopefully, and then hopefully the Bronx can go on a bit of a run too. But look, guys, the best rugby league fantasy competition is here again. Bundy, the NRL, and the NRLW are back with the world's first mixed gender fantasy league, the Bundy Mixer. I know many of you listening consider yourselves high-level fantasy players. This is going to really test your skill with the stars of the women's game able to be selected alongside the men. It's a really great way to elevate the women's game. As we all know, fantasy sports drive a significant amount of interest in rugby league. And with the rapid growth of the NRLW, this is the perfect combo. Plus, it's super easy to play. You only need to pick 6 players each week, 3 guys, 3 girls, no salary caps, and it runs into the finals too. So there's no other, fantasy SuperCoach comp that runs through to the finals. Bundy Mixer is the one. James and I consider ourselves pretty gun fantasy players and big fans of the women's game. So head to mixer.nrl.com to take us on and enter the special league code for Magic Sponge listeners, XZMGRYI9, or head to the link in the podcast description. There's plenty of prizes to be won. Now, James, as it stands, we've got the biggest league in the land so far, and we want to try and hold on to that if we can. We are just the little podcast that could, but mate, I'm keen to get in the mixer again, and hopefully with such a big league, we can still come out on top.
I'm so keen, Brian. Like, there's a lot of people frothing it as well. I think we've got over 300 as it stands at the moment. Hopefully, we get a lot more before the season commences. And I think what I want to talk about is just how keen I am for the NRLW start up again, Brian. I've been seeing some clips up on social media recently, a few highlights from the years gone by. There's been some really good stuff coming out on the socials. Even in the trials today, Brian, probably worth mentioning a couple of big injuries in the Roosters. So Colton Baxter looks like maybe a serious knee injury, and then Brodie Parker's had a upper limb injury of some concern as well. So the Roosters high flying team might be a few opportunities there, might be a few candidates for the mix, Brian. What do you reckon in the mix?
Yeah, mate, I think the Roosters are going to be red hot this year, like they are every year. Corbin Baxter and Brodie Parker, big losses. I think Corbin Baxter, she's obviously New South Wales legend, has played many games for them, and Brodie Parker, I think, has played a PM's 13 game, so she's got some rep footy behind her as well. So it's 2 rep stars. Like, yeah, the video of both, like Brodie's injury was a bit blocked, so you couldn't really see, but yeah, Corbin Baxter's was non-contact. So yeah, that, as we all know, that's always concerning for something around the ACL-ish kind of region. Hopefully it's not the case. And I think Corbin's just come back after, having a bub, and she's getting back into footy and that kind of thing. So, yeah, hopefully, I mean, fingers crossed it's not as bad as it looks. But, yeah, keen as for the NRLW and for the Bunny Mix are really, really good stuff. Guys, as always, we're on YouTube. Head on over there, subscribe, review, thumbs up. We're also on rugbyleague.com if you want to listen via there, if that makes it a little bit easier for you. This is the place where you listen to everything for injury analysis in the NRL. We loop it all back to SuperCoach Fantasy, those kind of things. If you like what you're listening to, patreon.com/NRL Physio. You've heard us bang on about it before. I'm going to keep doing it anyway. Head on over there. Heaps of stuff going on. But otherwise, yeah, let's get straight into it. All the injuries from round 19.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Ryan, we love all types of footy, but we especially love our buy-round footy. So what we're going to talk through this week on the abbreviated week is a couple of HIAs to start with. Don't need to talk about these in depth. Alex Seyfarth was one and Brodie Jones was the other. And probably just a really quick origin update pre-Wednesday night. So Bradman Best looks like he's got through the training session with a hamstring concern, and Harry Grant's being cleared to play with a sternum injury as well. Any last-minute news on the origin front there, Brian? Any other whispers you've heard out of camp? Anyone nursing IV or getting out of their hospital bed to front up for Wednesday night?
Well, mate, I think you can guarantee that there's some Queenslanders from the underdog Queensland Maroons getting up, just overcoming injuries that you wouldn't see mere mortals overcome to play this Wednesday. But on a serious note, Bradman Best getting through with his hammy. Yeah, it is a concern. I think this is his third hamstring issue. Scans have showed no damage and that kind of thing, but we know the aggravation risk of hamstrings. He had literally this thing happen coming out of Magic round, I believe. He had hamstring issue. He had scans. Nothing came of it. He played the next week and had a grade 2 strain. So this is outside of my Queensland hat. This is literally just from injury perspective. There is some re-injury risk there for him, particularly in Origin this week. And then Grant with a sternum, he's been cleared to play as well, but he will also be a risk of aggravation in the game if he cops a blow to the wrong spot, although that is something that he could potentially needle up and play through or come back on, that kind of thing.
Well summarised, Brian. We're going to talk about the Finns versus Bunny. So another good win by the Dolphins here. And Brian, can we talk firstly about the return of Tavita Pangai Jr. to absolute dominance in this game as well? We talked about it. We said Wayne might have the gift. It's looking more and more like Wayne has got the gift for this one. We'll talk injuries first, and we'll start slurping Tavita Pangai Jr. again, just to wrap that around. So Jai Arrow, he's facing shoulder surgery. We've talked about him extensively on the podcast before. Out of this one, Euan Aitken looks like he's a pec injury, most likely surgery with this one as well, from what it seems. Kodi Nikorima has been nursing a sternum concern. And then for the Bunnies, they've put a line through a few players for the rest of this year. So Campbell, Lachlan, Ilias, Isaiah Tass, and Junior Tatola. We've talked about them extensively in the past, but it sounds like they're all going to be ruled out for the rest of the year. Where do you want to start with the Finns versus Bunnies, Brian? We'll stick to the injuries first, and we talk about the fantasy implications. But do you want to go straight to Jai Arrow? What do you reckon?
Yeah, mate. This is, there's a lot going on here, but it's all pretty straightforward. Jai Arrow with the shoulder surgery, he's been playing through it. He's finally got it surgically repaired. He's looking at it's usually 4 to 6 months for a rotator cuff repair. So he should be fine for round 1 next year. Euan Aitken with the pec, it's 99% going to be surgical case, considering the mechanism and how much, he was carrying it afterwards. So that's usually 10 to 14 weeks. So I think that will even rule him out potentially of the Finns grand final winning performance when they do win the 2024 premiership, unfortunately. So, even Aitken, mate, I mean, the Finns, look, they're doing real well and I love them, but, mate, their season-ending injuries are just getting, a bit too much for me at the moment. Kodi Nikorima, sternum, he's been nursing that for a little bit. He just aggravated in the game. They're hopeful he can kind of, with a longer turnaround, be okay. A bit similar to Harry Grant, just a risk of aggravation moving forward. And then, Campbell, Lockie, Ilias, Isaiah Tass, Junior Tatola, all out for the year. I think they are going to bring back Ty Munro at some point, though, which surprised me. I thought, considering this is his third collarbone fracture in 18 months, that they'd kind of shut him down as well. Sounds like they are going to try and bring him back. Just with their approach to a few of these things, like your Jai Arrow with the shoulder and all these guys getting shut down, I think from a fantasy perspective, my big takeaway is if you're a Latrell Mitchell owner and you're kind of hanging on to him or planning to hang on to him on the potential that he could be right in 4 weeks, this approach gives me real concern that if they lose another 1 or 2 games and they're mathematically out of it, that he's gone for the year, that they'll just shut him down no matter what. I don't know. Where do you sit on that, mate? Because that's kind of my take on it at the moment.
Yeah, I think we spoke about that last week. I think we said if he's out 4 weeks, he's probably a trade out. And if he's, if say facing surgery, he's a trade out for sure. I still feel the same. I think, especially Jai Gray, I think just getting him an extended run there, they'll probably see what they've got in him. And Latrell is one of their key players. I'm pretty sure if Wayne Bennett's got anything to say about that scenario, he might shut people down as well. For the Finns, mate, with Euan Aitken missing, could we see Tavita on an edge? Dare we dare to dream? That's probably
Mate,
talking dirty, actually. That's
you,
that's
you,
more than a dream. That's a
oh,
wet dream.
you said at the start, like, I think Wayne Bennett's got it figured out. I'll tell you who doesn't have it figured out, me and you, because we didn't trade in Tavita. We doubted the
No.
great man. Like I'm so filthy.
Mate,
That
I
was
didn't
the one thing.
doubt him. I've got no trades. I don't have enough trades. I doubted
Well,
myself too many
neither do I.
times.
But if we've got one singular
Yeah.
trade left, surely using it on Tavita
Wow.
Pangai Jr. in a Dolphins jersey is the way you got to do it, right? Because that's my one regret. I did really well this week, but my absolute biggest regret was not having Tavita Pangai in my team when he put up 90 points on a bye week. I was like, oh man. And now if he's on an edge, I mean, I've got a plan for the rest of the year, but that might just blow it out of the water.
Wow. You're only human, Brian. I mean, if you see him on an edge and he's facing big minutes, you got to do what you got to do. But even I think in the presser, I think Wayne said like even Jesse Bromwich was like nursing it back in and out. So there's a few things floating around there for the Dolphins middle minutes. He played 52 as well, I think, on the weekend. So I mean, if he's getting 52 minutes week in, week out, and Wayne's calling him dominant as well, I mean, sign me up. What more do you need to hear? Just get him in there. All right, we'll move on to Vita. God, he's going to come back into calculations for fantasy. We've got to get him in there, Brian, for the yarn at least. Sharks v Tigers, the big names here, Brian. So Nicho Hynes with the syndesmosis and tibia injury. That was pre-game. That was at training. Jesse Colquhoun, who was an ACL injury out of that one. And then Api Koroisau was a calf. Hopefully not too long an absence there for Api Koroisau because that's big for a lot of fantasy rosters, myself included. Off the back of losing Jeremy Marshall-King the week before. I'm not going to have a hooker for a bit of time there by the look of things, Brian.
Yeah, mate, I think the scan results haven't been reported yet, but the one report that did come back was last night. The Tigers were said to be doubtful that he would play next week, but hopeful that it wasn't too bad, effectively. So that to me sounds like, probably a grade 1, which you're looking at usually 1 to 3 weeks return to play. So, I mean, yeah, once we get that confirmed, we'll obviously know more, but usually I would say probably the safest week, if you had to plant your flag somewhere, would be round 21. So having a week off, then round 21 or maybe round 22. So hopefully you're not without him for too long because it didn't look like a partial tear as much as you can tell, gradings from video. It is a bit hard, but yeah, so hopefully minor strain and back in 2 to 3 weeks would be my initial thing. Jesse Colquhoun with the ACL. Yeah, that was just, it was as soon as you saw that shift, I've said it before, it is the most diagnostic a video of an injury can be for me, because when what I mean by that is that a lot of the video that I do, I would say, is analysis. So I'm just looking at the video, I'm looking at, how did the injury occur, and I'm giving impressions on what could potentially be injured. But effectively, when I say diagnostic, I'm like that if you see that shift below the knee, like you saw with Colquhoun, it's like looking at an MRI that says the ACL's ruptured, effectively. Like when you see that shift, there's not really too many other things that could be injured. Probably the only thing is if they have like a past PCL rupture and they've got a bit of a loose knee, you can maybe have some shift there. But yeah, once you see that shift, it's pretty much, the ACL's gone. So that was pretty nasty to see. So he'll be out for 9 months being a younger player. So I think, what are we now? Yeah. So it probably, he won't be back for round 1 next year, which is a bit of a rough one for him, or he'll be pushing it anyway. So yeah, that's a really tough one. He'd only played, I think it was under 10 minutes of first grade, came back from a nasty foot fracture earlier in the season as well. So yeah, thoughts go out to him. And then Nicho Hynes, mate, this just came from nowhere. And this, like, I'm sure destroyed like a lot of Sharks fans out there. That was obviously a big killer. But yeah, a lot of super coaches like myself and yourself who have very limited trades, seeing this come out. We'll talk about the implications of the injury in a sec, but I just wanted to say, like, for something like this to happen at training is, so rare. Like, I think it was reported he went up for a bomb and sort of came down and came down on it awkwardly. Like, far out. That, like, to have this amount of damage from jumping up for a bomb and coming down with it is, that it doesn't get much more unlucky, especially after, he apparently talked a guy off a bridge, from committing suicide the day before or something.
Wow.
So just like what a roller coaster 48 hours for Hynes and the Sharks. I had a lot of questions about this around, like, it's a syndesmosis injury plus a tibia fracture, but they've said 8 weeks. And a lot of people have been really dubious about, why is it 8 weeks? How can that be the case? It's more than likely that it's just like a minor tibia fracture. So there are certain types of tibia fractures where you can get like what we call an avulsion, which is where a ligament just pulls like a little chip of bone away. You can have minor cracks in the tibia in and around certain areas that aren't as important. So I would say with the 8-week return to play, it is absolutely is possible because, once again, adequate bone healing, you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks. And then the syndesmosis injury, we know people coming back in that 6 to 8 weeks as well. So it's absolutely possible. It's just more than likely that we're dealing with a minor tibia fracture here and no involvement of the actual ankle joint itself. Because once you start dealing with that, it just extends it out. And obviously a trade from SuperCoach purposes.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing my brain went to with Nicho Brien was like maybe like bi-malleolar or tri-malleolar. Like, you guess you sometimes see them a little bit of times where sometimes they're not extensive, but they might be something that makes it a little bit more complicated from like just purely a tightrope surgery. There might be a little bit more in the mix there. That might be the only other thing to sort of consider in that sort of space, I'd say, but we haven't got any further information on that, so I guess there's not much else we can go off. Titans vs Eels next was something we don't need to talk about, Ryan, because there's no injuries there. From the Broncos Dragons, Raymond Faitala-Mariner was ruled out pre-game with back spasms. Probably don't need to touch on too much there, Brian. Anything you want to add?
No, I think we spoke about last week that the back spasms, they usually settle quite quickly, and they obviously settled enough for him to look like he was going to play, and he was out there, warming up. The problem with back spasms, as we see here, is they're easily aggravated. That's the problem, is you can, with back spasms, a bit like the sternum issues where we talk about, and that's probably the clear thing between like aggravation risk versus like injury and damage risk, is you have this aggravation risk, which is like, I'm completely fine, I'm all good. And then you just aggravate the issue, and it doesn't mean that you're out once again long term. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if 24, 48 hours later, Ray could have been all good. But that is kind of what exists with these back issues, is it can aggravate quite easily, which obviously happened for him. The only thing I would say, I forgot to put it on the run sheet, mate, but AJ Brimson coming off early with like coming back from his groin issue in the Titans Eels. I don't think that's much of a concern. I think like Keeney on the bench, that was pretty much the only option to get him in the game, and like a really, really smart way to ease Brimson back. Because as we all know, AJ Brimson is a fullback and is a gun fullback, as we've spoken about. So, yeah, I think, that's probably all I've got. Nothing really else to say on either of those guys.
No, David Fifita, also a gun back rower, Brian. I don't know how he didn't get a call up for a rep team, but anyway, he played pretty good on the weekend as well while watching. Last game of the round was Manly and the Knights, Brian. So out of this one, only Greg Marzhew with a quad cork, so that is very unlikely that he'll miss any time with that. Most likely, hey, Brian.
Yeah, it is. They do have the short turnaround. So, he's the thing with corks is they get so much more painful in the coming days. So he's going to be, but Adam O'Brien said post match, that there's, that they're just going to manage it during the week, which is absolutely right. Once again, aggravation risk is there for him, but unlikely to be anything major. Actually, the only other thing out of this, another one I forgot on the sheet, I'm not sure if you saw, but Reuben Garrick came off at about the 63rd
Oh, yeah, I was meant
minute.
to ask
So
you that. Sorry.
yeah, so he came off a little bit early. I went back and had a look because I was like he was sitting on the bench and there was footage of him like giving the thumbs up, I'm fine, don't worry about me kind of thing. But I went back and had a look in the 10 minutes before. He had one where he got hip dropped. So he got hip dropped and like carried on to, it was about 10 minutes before he came off. But he kept like every involvement after that. He kept topping up, like shaking his head and was like, going, what the hell? Because he appealed for a penalty at the time. It didn't look like anything major. It didn't even look, I know I've said in the past, sometimes you can get those ones and they play on through and then they need surgery afterwards for like a syndesmosis injury or something like that. But it didn't look super nasty. So there was that component. And then he also went low in a tackle and kind of got up and maybe was a little bit hazy, and he's obviously just come back from a concussion recently. So a couple options there that it could be. I don't think it's anything to be too concerned about at this point in time. So I think for Marzhew and Garrick owners like myself and hopefully like you next week, if you can make some trades work, I think they both should be fine.
Yeah, and I've got a good draw coming up, so that's a must do. Last two we're going to talk about, Brian, just quickly from an update perspective, is Luke Keary with, I guess, like a pubic bone stress response there, like osteitis pubis. And then the other one from the Bulldogs is friend of the show, preseason darling, Max King. So Gus Gould put out a tweet about his status of his wrist, which sounded like a wrist fracture. And then that tweet disappeared into the abyss. So I don't know what the status is here with Max King and the wrist, whether it's forearm, whether it's wrist, whether it's scaphoid. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if you got any more source than that. I guess have you talked to Gus Gould personally about it?
Yeah, we didn't bring it up on our weekly catch up call last night just to discuss the footy, which is a bit of a bugger. But on the Max King tweet disappearing, I got caught up with that too. It's that he tagged the Bulldogs as his first part of the text, so you have to go to the replies part rather than his front page, and it's still there. So the tweet is still there. Yeah. So the tweet is still there. So unfortunately, Max King still has a broken wrist. I got super excited when I found out. Like, I was like, oh my God, maybe it's not broken. Because as we know, we love Zeus on this show. But yeah, look, it's not looking good for Max King. I think he played, it hasn't been confirmed whether it's still the same wrist fracture that he played through. He only missed a week and then played through it. See, the problem here is that, say that's a scaphoid fracture, James, which we've spoken about in the past. Sometimes you can play through those, but then the risk is that over time that bone just doesn't heal. It gets worse and worse and worse, and eventually gets to a point where the bone is just cooked and you need surgery. That's the risk that you take by playing through those. So that is an option. It is also an option that he just suffered a new fracture. So we haven't had that confirmed yet. But yeah, look, at the moment as we sit here, as much as I'd love to say that as a Max King owner that I'm expecting he's going to be fine or hoping he's going to be fine, I have about 5% hope at this point in time. Because yeah, if you've got, because Gus is obviously just regurgitating what the medical staff have sent to him. If they're talking about surgery in 8 weeks, there's no reason to bring that up if it's not really looking likely. So yeah, at this stage I'm planning to have to trade out Max King, which is an absolute killer because he was just absolutely lighting it up. I'll throw back to you in a second about Max King, but yeah, Luke Keary, the pubic bone stress, just something he's going to have to continue to manage. I'm sure heaps of people have heard of osteitis pubis before. It's just that it's bruising of the pelvis or the pubic bone, which is right in the midline, but like right below your belly button, effectively right in there. You get lots of pain in there, that kind of thing. It's just something he's going to have to manage his training loads moving forward, but not expected to miss games for the Roosters at this stage. Yeah, mate, just pull one out for Max King / Zeus. Just sad times.
Yeah, I'm pretty devo about it because he was low ownership in fantasy and he scored 2 big scores back to back. So I was like you, I've got him in the front row still. because I've got so few trades, Brian, I can't really trade him out this week. I'm just going to have to roll with like Curran, Fainu, and who else I've got in the front row there? Curran, Fainu,
Hey?
and May as well. You're right, yeah. So I've got just the choice of those ones. So I'll just have to keep him in there and just pray for a miracle that Zeus can heal up quickly, father of Hercules. So we can see him back on a football field sooner rather than later. 8 weeks sounds pretty gnarly, Brian. Like I just heard 8 weeks and I thought, geez, to me that almost sounds like scaphoid bone graft fixation, doesn't it? Like because if you're thinking a forearm fracture or a carpal fracture or a metacarpal fracture, none of those really have an 8-week time frame. So I guess when you hear 8 weeks, that does make me a bit suspicious for that type of scenario. Is that a fairly good assumption to make here or assertion?
Exactly what I'm thinking has happened. That he had a scaphoid fracture back earlier in the season. They were like, look, we think we can brace it up and you can play through it. He's played through it. He played through it. Pain's gotten worse and they've rescanned it. And yeah, the scaphoid's just not a nice bone to fracture. It has a bit of a dodgy blood supply at times. So yeah, I would say they've gone in, seen the fractures worse, and they're like, yep, graft or pin, combo or both. That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah. Well, that's really unlucky because he was playing lights out rugby league football in the front row there for the Dogs, and the Dogs are flying as well. So who saw that coming at the start of the year? That's the end of the injuries for this week, Brian. We're going to race into the Patreon questions now. So patreon.com/NRL Physio if you want to have these questions answered every week. Let's sink our teeth into this one first, Brian. So is Nicho Hynes really a chance of coming back in 8 weeks because the tibia is involved? And I guess the question this patron has is like Isaiah Tass was out way longer than 8 weeks. Why would it be around that time frame if the tibia is involved, do you think?
Yeah, I think we just spoke about how Nicho, yes, he absolutely is a chance coming back at 8 weeks. So I think for any Sharkies fans there's a good chance that he's available for that final week of the season or potentially early in the finals. Now, why Isaiah Tass is out so much longer is exactly what we we're talking about before. There's just a lot of different fracture types. So you can have, like complex fractures, fractures into the ankle joint itself. So then you're dealing with cartilage. That's a bit more difficult to deal with. So yeah, there's just different variations of fracture. You hear tibia fracture and they're not all built the same. So yeah, and I think the Rabbits are also taking it ultra conservative with Tass as well, as we spoke about too. So yeah, there's a few different components, but I would say the biggest component is that not all tibia fractures are made equal.
Yeah, I wouldn't add anything on top of that there, Brian. I think it's just everything's just a little bit more specific to the individual, depending on what they need with that. Question 2 was about Luke Metcalf. So there's a training video the Warriors put out recently. Where do you think he is at, I guess, moving forward for the rest of this season after witnessing that training video there, Brian? Bit of a pump up from the Wales?
Yeah, mate, it was good to see. Speaking of tibia fractures, here's a pretty significant tibia fracture that's taken a long, long time. Look, it was good to see him back out on the field. It still didn't look like he was doing a heap, though. So I've always had him for the last 3 or 4 rounds. And I kind of probably still think that's about right. Like we're at round 19, 20 now. Give him another, 3, 4 weeks if everything goes really well, unless he's doing more than they showed on that training video potentially behind the scenes. But yeah, from what we saw on that video, and that would ring true. I think a patron asked me this week in the live chat, or in the group chat, because I had him listed as round 24 via the casualty ward, and that is kind of been my expectation for a bit now. And yeah, that probably still sticks about true, I'd say.
Be interesting to see because it's such a significant injury, and the Warriors are one of the few teams that have a decent amount of halves depth. So again, I'm not really 100% on where I'd put my money there. I just don't know if we'll see him necessarily this year regardless, Brian. I think he might get a few games at the cup level, but I don't know if you'll see him at NRL level necessarily this year. I guess if you're trying to stash from a draft point of view, perhaps in fantasy. Question 3 is about any updates on Benticura and Cohen Hess. I think they're coming back from foot and knee injuries respectively there. I guess Benticura might be a little bit closer than Cohen Hess because Cohen Hess was an ACL, so he's probably more towards next year. But Benticura's been, God, he must be getting close to like that 12-week stage after this Frank surgery, Brian, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think his was a pretty extensive Liz Frank injury, though. So they were saying that it was probably going to be a little bit longer, more like that 16 weeks. So I think the last update I had, someone asked Kevy a couple of weeks ago, like, with all their injuries and different things, would he be close? And Kev said, oh, no, he's not even close. He's not doing this and that. So, yeah, I think he's still another month off at least at this point in time. And then whether he's another one, do they bring him back at all this season or being a big bopper? That's the other thing with a Liz Frank injury and such a big guy. Like we've spoken about Liz Frank injuries, how over in the NFL, they're pretty big killers, because of the body sizes and the body types of the guys over there. Big O lineman or something like that who's 150 kilos, obviously coming back from a Liz Frank injury is very different to, like a little fullback in the NRL or something like that. So Bentiker is a big boy, so they probably just have to take it a little bit more carefully with him. And then Cohen Hess, yeah, he's on track. He started running the last I saw, but nothing outside of that. He sounds like he's doing quite well. But I mean, the Broncos could use Bentiker at this point, mate.
Yeah, we could use a lot of people. Bentiker would be one that we could use, but yeah, it's starting to be absolute panic stations there for the boys. I don't know why there hasn't been more questions asked of a certain coach involved there, because it's been fairly quiet on the K Walters criticism. So yeah, it'd be one to watch for the Broncos there, because if they keep losing, that'll start to get pretty hot, that seat there. But I don't know. I think Kevy might have some people in the right places there when it comes to sort of media and things like that. Question next from Patreon Brian was about ice on injuries. Do they actually work for injuries? That's ice cold ice, not methamphetamine.
Oh, they probably both have about the same effect. But
Yeah,
yeah,
probably.
no,
Yeah.
I think this question came off the back of a little Twitter exchange. I had a Patreon messaging me about it. There was a guy on there who was telling me that there was no way that Colquhoun's injury was an ACL because the medical staff let him back on the field without crutches and just had his knee iced up. And they said, no way are they letting him back on like that with an ACL injury. And then once that it was confirmed it was an ACL injury, it was then, the Sharks are being negligent and why would you put ice on it and all this kind of thing. So it was a whole bunch of moving the goalposts. It was all over the shop with this one person. But I guess the question to come out of this was like, why do they ice with injuries? Because this is a big thing at the moment. And I'm sure you're across this as well, James. There's a lot of like changing research behind it. The whole rest, ice, compression, elevation thing for acute injuries is kind of, it's gone by the wayside. That's not really how we approach injuries anymore, particularly the rest part of it. Like we want to get things moving. We like your body's inflammatory processes and that whole thing that it does after suffering an injury is a good thing for the injury. It's part of your body's way of healing itself. So the thought process is that by putting ice on it, that could potentially slow down that healing. Even though it helps with pain and, helps keep the swelling down, does it, limit the inflammatory process? And look, from effectively the way I approach ice at the moment is I say, yes, it does work for injuries, but it works for injuries in the way of limiting pain. So you put ice on something, it numbs it. If you numb it, it means you can move it better, getting away from that rest thing and getting injuries moving. That's the benefit that ice can have. And from the evidence that I know of, and there might be more out there, but the evidence that I know of is that the ice doesn't do enough. It doesn't penetrate your tissue enough to make too much difference around like, limiting inflammatory processes and those kind of things. So it numbs the area. If you can move the area more after numbing it, then that's really positive because we want to get injuries moving for the most part. So I would say it's just changed a little bit where, potentially when we first started as a physio, you maybe told people to ice things for like 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off and keep doing it for however many hours or whatever. Now I just go ice it for 5 or 10 minutes and then get it moving. That's what I say to people. Generally, any evidence or research that I'm missing there, mate, or any components that you can think of?
No, not to my memory there, Brian. I think you've nailed all the key points there regarding ice management for injuries. We'll move to the last question, I reckon, because this is an interesting one, right in your tennis wheelhouse as an absolute tennis nuff. So with Novak Djokovic, question is, how is he doing his thing? How is that actually legitimately possible if the reports are true? So what's the timeline with his injury and surgery there, Brian? Do you know the exact specifics around this?
Yeah, so 25 days post partial meniscectomy, he returned to Wimbledon, so that's 3 weeks and 3 days. So tore his meniscus. They went in and did the keyhole surgery where they go in and they shave away the torn portion of meniscus. 3-week return. Like, to do what he does on the court. Yeah, look, like, I think there's two components to this. Number one, I've had that many people. I just put out like an innocent tweet about it. That many people get on to me about, no, it's like and you would love this as a tinfoil hatter. I should be throwing to you for this, but everyone's like, nah, it's a sham. He's just making up, he's just doing it to build his legacy, and he didn't even get anything done, and he was just blaming his knee for losing at the French Open and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's the conspiracy side of it, but look, I choose to believe that that's not the case, because I went and had a read and there's a lot of different doctors and that with knowledge of the situation. I think there's too many people in on the conspiracy for it to be a conspiracy, but this is the perfect example of anybody who asks me, like, how can these pro athletes who I've watched on TV come back so much quicker than I do? So, if I have an everyday mum or dad come in with or after a surgery like this, and they're like, when can I get back to tennis? My answer is going to be, at least 6-8 weeks, potentially longer, right? Because yeah, that's pretty standard for the general population from an injury like this. Surgery like this, even though it is relatively minor on the scale. But this just shows you, if you are one of the best athletes in the world, how much a difference it can make, because that's all you can, yes, it could have been that they only shaved away the littlest, tiniest bit. But at the end of the day, Novak is as good as he is because of the athlete that he is. He's one of the best athletes physically on the planet. And so for him to come back in that amount of time, it shows you how much that makes a difference. That's kind of my, I guess, position on it, is that his body and the physical state that he is in, it plays a massive role. Yes, probably the minor nature of the surgery does as well, but yeah, mate, that's the only thing I can kind of point to explain how a guy can, win, and by the time people listen to this, he might be Wimbledon champion, right? Less than 5 or just over 5 weeks after having a partial meniscectomy, to be Wimbledon champion, that would just be huge. He's either that or the runner-up, which are both huge achievements. I mean, yeah, that's all I can think of, is that he's just superhuman athletically.
Yeah, absolute freak show of an athlete, isn't he? He's just one of one, really, Novak, when you're talking in the tennis sense in terms of athleticism. I guess a lot of serve volleys there, Brian, on Wimbledon. That might be the only other thing in his favour. Keep points short, get to the net ASAP and keep them short. But it's still a seriously impressive thing to be able to do that less than 4 weeks after meniscectomy, especially when you think about playing 5 sets and playing big minutes. That's high load through the meniscus there, through your knees. All the stuff involved with tennis, it's all big with that stuff. So yeah, pretty amazing stuff. I struggle to believe it personally, but that's because I'm a conspiracy theorist and that's just how I roll.
But yeah, it was on grass too, and grass is the most forgiving.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I think I got a bit of Wimbledon fever this week. I haven't picked up a racket in a long, long time, James. For those listening who don't know, I did used to like my tennis back in the day, but have lost a bit of touch with it. I actually picked up a racket for the first time in years this week and went and had a hit, and we had an option between hard court or grass. I went grass every day of the week, mate. These old bones, old joints. I was like, yep, give me a grass court where I can slide around, bit more forgiving. So yeah, maybe that helped Novak a little bit as well. All right, let's go on to SuperCoach Corner. Mate, this is probably the biggest SuperCoach Corner of the year, in that we don't have many trades left, don't get me wrong, but the moves that you make in the next couple of weeks really set your side up for the next, the run home, the next 8 rounds running home. So yeah, it's really important. Let's run through, mate. You've done pretty well this week. I think your side's in a really good spot. We're both pretty comfortable with where our sides are at, but what are the big moves you're going to make in the next couple of weeks? Just charge home and hopefully win that 50 grand, mate.
Yeah, I feel a lot better now after the trade-ins, and I guess the score I had this week, probably a little bit mid-range. There seems to be a lot of big scores floating out there, but high variance this week. So 10-10 was my score this week. I had the VC on Jaden Campbell, and I got really low scores out of Marzhew, Brennan Pitt, Galvin, and Kodi. So I had pretty good numbers, but not very good scores there. So trade-ins this week, I traded in Jaden Campbell, that I sweated bullets about for days, because I had Tom in there for the longest time at fullback, and then I actually traded them out just before that game, and I was pretty happy about that. So I traded in Jaden Campbell and Hamole Olkawatu, so that'll be a good one moving forward. The big issues out of this round for my team, so I've got Jeremy Marshall-King and Abby Koroisau injured hooker. So what I'm going to do is actually roll auto emergency through hooker position until Coro is back, so hopefully not too long there, Brien. And then round 20 is a bit of a stinker for me because I've got to cover 3 Sharks and 2 Eels that are in my side that go on by. So it's a pretty decent round next round where I think I've just got 17 to cover there, including an AE. So it's not going to be a great score for me next week, but that's just the way it is. So this week plans are trade out Sharp to Reuben Garrick at fullback. That way he can switch around through centre wing and fullback with Kale Iro. That's mainly to cover the Sharks buy round next, and then Manly buy round in round 22. So that's my decision to make of getting Garrick in at fullback, so I can switch between those ones, just to give me a little bit of positional flexibility. Then the other one I want to do is go Lockie Galvin to Tom Trbojevic via Jaden Campbell. Sadly for me, I spoke to you about this before the week. I was like, if I could really see Garrick and Tom go less than their break evens, because I think they'll break evens in the 120s. That'd be really good for my coin. But anyway, they both went massive this week, so that was a stitch up. And I think I've had that in the past this year where I wanted Garrick in and then he scored 144, and I was like, man, I just cannot pick the right time to get Reuben Garrick in this year. It's been a stitch up. So then those are the 2 this week. So Garrick and Turbo are probably the 2. And then I'm looking at Nicho Hynes to Nathan Cleary at round 21, because Cleary's got a break even of 180. So I think if Cleary gets named as expected in round 20, hopefully I can eye him in for round 21. I've got 743 grand in the bank. It's going to be pretty good with those 3 trades. So I've got to go, like Sharp to Garrick, and I've got to probably go, Galvin to Turbo, Nicho to Cleary. It's going to be pretty tight with 743 in the bank, Brien. So I'm really, really, really hoping that I have enough money to make it work. I'll just have to suss that out this week in what that looks like to make it happen. And just pray that Cleary does go absolutely colossal and put up like 150 so he doesn't drop enough cash. In terms of where to after that, I think I've only got 3 trades left after that. So then I'm eyeing Kalen Ponga around about round 23 or round 24. And hopefully, because his break even is 170, so hopefully Ponga drops a couple, he can come down into maybe the mid 7s. That'd be pretty nice. And then I figure out how to get him in as my last trade and try to hold on for dear life from that point in time. It's going to be holding on for dear life from this round onwards anyway. With a few injuries starting to stack up, I'm going to have to nurse Max King. I've got no hookers. But I'm just going to pump up centre wing and fullback this week, despite looking at alternatives in that realm. I think he's got to hit the ceiling. Tom's got the ceiling. Garrick's got a ceiling. Manly got a good draw apart from the bye. I'm just going to roll with that and just hope that I can make more over that time period. I think Tom's only 4 or 5% rostered as well, so that might change after this week. I think after seeing him go massive. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see what people do at fullback for the run home, because that's a pretty important spot to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, mate, I completely agree with you. I've been a big proponent of just screw all positions bar pretty much fullback, centre, and halfback to a degree until we've had all the injuries. But yeah, just load up in CTW and fullback there, that's where I'll want most of my reserves coming from, at least 3 of them coming from there. I like the play of just kind of surviving at front row, surviving at hooker if you can, and then just loading up there, because that's where you can get the big scores, as we saw this week as well. Mate, we have done really well. I like this week in terms of we both made a relatively big move, bringing in Jaden Campbell without even talking to each other about it. Like we kind of spoke about Tommy Turbo last week, but I think we both came to the realization of, hopefully he can, go a bit lower than his break even. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. But I just wanted to eyeball him and see how he went, how he looked, because he did look a bit short of a gallop last week. He looked real good today. It was a poor night side that didn't really show up. But I was really impressed. So I traded in Haumole Olokuatu and Jaden Campbell for Latrell and Nicho. Got 1,096, which I'm pretty happy about. The big thing, I love the look of Campbell, but the big thing for Campbell for me was there's so much going on at fullback that I didn't want to lock in Turbo and rob me potentially going to a Reece Walsh next week or a Kalen Ponga at some point. So that's why I brought Campbell in at fullback, because I got Campbell at fullback and Plath at 5'8". And so I can trade anyone anywhere at the moment, because effectively now my plan this week is to go either Cleary or a gun fullback in for Max King. I can make that happen, moving things around. So moving Campbell to a fullback or bringing Campbell in at fullback just really gave me a lot of options where I can kind of just sit there and trade anywhere throughout my whole team and just make it work with what I want to do. So I really wanted to eye off Turbo today, but I'm so tempted by Walsh. I reckon Reynolds is still round 22, probably 23 at this point in time. That's 3 weeks of Walsh as a goal-kicking fullback for the Bronx. I know they're not going that great at the moment, but to your point, the other thing is, mate, you need Ponga for that last month because they have some a really good draw. And so one of my 5 trades I have left, I'm I need Ponga at that time. I think staying away from him for the because he's got Broncos by then Panthers or something combo of that in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. Does he back up after Origin as well is probably the other one is do they back him up or not? I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm not super desperate to get Ponga in yet, but I'm just I loved Turbo today, but whether the Walsh, do I do Walsh with, goal kicking until Reynolds come back and then go to Ponga would be a beautiful synergy, hopefully. So that's kind of, I don't know, as much as I don't want to miss out on Turbo, if Turbo's low owned, I'd assume Walsh is pretty low ownership as well. So yeah, that's kind of my thing at the moment. I've got to decide who I want to bring in out of those two. And then do I want to go early on Cleary? I just think my biggest thing is I think when Cleary comes back, Penrith's going to go into fuck you mode a little bit. And that's why I'm actually liking having Isaac Tungo there. I've complained about him all season, but I'm hoping that finally now that Cleary is back, that he can be a nice little point of difference for me over the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season. But yeah, I'm really tempted to go early on Cleary because they got the Finns, and I love the Finns, and I think they're overachieving. They're absolutely killing it at the moment. But up against a Penrith side in that mood, the Finns injury, situation, and as good as they've been going, it's always a 34-28 win or something. It seems they don't seem to ever limit teams too much in terms of defense. They've got a mounting injury. I think there's a real, like I said, and patrons are going to kill me here because I wrote in the casualty ward when Cleary first went down, I was like, it's going to halfback's going to have to be in a real crappy position for me to consider Cleary when he first comes back. That's what I wrote initially when he went down. Well, yeah, at the moment, halfback's a pretty crappy position is the argument that I'd make. Because, yeah, with Nicho going down, that's put my halfback spot at a pretty dire straits. I've got Wishart there, who should be serviceable maybe for one more week until Munster's back. So, yeah, look, it's yeah, I'm definitely considering him. I'm going back on my initial thing because the other thing too is I do truly believe that they've held Cleary back a few weeks. Like, I think they could have pushed to bring him back earlier, but they've held him back specifically for this back end. So that's where I'm at. I'm either going to go balls to I could do both, to be honest. I could do Cleary in for Wishart and then a fullback in for Max King potentially. But I think with Wishart potentially getting one more week, the Storm are playing the Roosters though. So don't hold it against me if I go both and just go balls to the wall and then try and ride out the rest of the season with 3 trades. But my next 2 weeks are going to be some combo of bringing those 2 in, I think. So I've got about 450 in the bank, or 550 in the bank. So similar to you, I should have the cash to do it.
Yeah, it gets squeezy with the cash. That's the only reason I just need to suss out if I do Garrick and Turbo, what that sort of looks like. Because Fletcher Sharp's only going to be like, he's only in like 380, I think, or about 360 or thereabouts. So it's a pretty big jump to get from him to even like Garrick. I think Garrick would be probably like low 6s. So that's about 250. Galvin to Turbo is probably 250. That's 500. And then Nicho to Cleary is about 100. So I don't know. The other thing is, like, do I just take Cleary in this week straight up and take Garrick in at fullback and then get Tom the next week? I'll just have to figure out what his break even's going to be out there as well with the 127 rolling through. It may not. I don't know what's going to be. It might not be that great. I need to get on Twitter and check out Jay Schubert's stuff. He's normally pretty all over that, isn't he?
As a Broncos nuffy, mate, what's your take on my Reece Walsh love? Like, would you be considering it?
Yeah, definitely. I would. I say that with like no confidence though. Like, I say that as a massive homer. So that's what you got to take as a massive grain of salt there, Brian. Like, I just love it because it's Reece Walsh and it's the Bronx. Do I love it situationally with what's happening with that team? Not really. I think what'll change that enormously though is if he has a very good game at Suncorp on Wednesday, if Queensland get home, like when Reece Walsh is layering up, he's like Latrell, mate. Like when he's just in the mood, like, you know what he's like. But he does really need Reynolds to play off with a lot of like their shape as well. I think he plays a lot better with Reynolds in that team. So I think you can definitely do it, but I probably like Turbo's draw a bit better. I think Broncos have got, who have they got coming up? Let's just have a look. So they've got Newcastle in Newcastle on the bounce back after a loss. That's probably not great. And then they've got the Bulldogs, which is a tough one. And then they've got on round 22, they've got the Titans at Seyfarth. So that's not a bad one. And then I think they buy in round 24, don't they? So I just don't know if that's enough for me to go balls to the wall and get Reece Walsh in. I think, I know Manly got the round 22 buy, but I just think Tom's shaping up like they've got a nicer draw towards the end of the year. They're probably not as Origin affected. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a coin flip one because Reece, when he's goal kicking, to your point, he's so elite. But you'll probably just need to eyeball him on Wednesday night and see where he's at, and see what you reckon. I guess the other thing is I guess there's injury baked in with both of them, so I don't think Reece is a higher injury risk than Tom at this point. Tom's obviously the hamstring risk, but then Reece is probably a HIA risk given the everything that's happened this year and given the way he plays, given the position he plays, and the risk there. So I think it's a like for like. I just don't know where they're at financially though, because I think Turbo's about 730 or 740. Reece would be a bit lower than that, I think, Brian, wouldn't he?
He's actually pretty
He's
similar.
about the same.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Is him, Ponga, and Turbo are all pretty similar. So yeah, Reece is actually 760. So that little bit.
Even that. I don't know.
So he's gone last 3 weeks. He's done all right, and that's what's killed it because he was down to 675, and then he's gone 93, 113, 82. So, mate, I don't know.
Yeah, 82 against the Panthers as well.
Yeah,
God, he looked good against the Panthers too.
I think I like your theory. So just for those listening, if you haven't looked up Jay Schubert on Twitter, hit it. Turbo's break even next week is 70. So, still.
Yeah, okay. So maybe not super urgent there to bring in. It might be more of a Cleary bring in, even if he's going to drop money, but you got the ceiling there with Nathan Cleary. And I think the beauty of like a Nathan Cleary, he's just got such a big ceiling that you can just, and the Panthers get so many like Thursday, Friday games that he's a VC option really, really consistently because they get the TV games far more than most other teams because they're so popular on TV. It's like really them and the Bronx. That's where Reece is kind of good because he gets a lot of Thursday, Friday night footy games, so you can VC him. But yeah, maybe Cleary looks like the better shout there now. They're looking a bit more. And the Panthers' draw is pretty cushy coming up, Brian. Like, they don't have a lot that they have to run through to get to, finals time. The only thing you might have to see is if they rest people at round 27, because they're probably going to be sitting in the top 4. But their draw's good. Like, everything looks pretty good for them. So they've got Finns, Dragons, Knights, Eels, Storm. Even the Storm are leaking a few, so that's not like a barn burner. Then it's Raiders, Bunnies, Titans. That's like
Yeah, mate. Isaac Tungo,
probably
he's going
one
to
of the
average.
better
Isaac
draws.
Tungo is going to average 120 to finish the season. You
Yeah,
watch.
sadly he's still in my team as well, but hopefully we can just keep the reserve on him and he can start just delivering a few meat pies or doing anything. Because geez, it's been a tough sled. I think you bought him in at 700, didn't you? And he's down in
Oh,
like the
fuck.
390 or something like that. Like,
Oh,
man, what
boy.
an absolute letdown for someone who's historically been pretty good.
I thought I was just the smartest man in the room when I brought him in at 700. Thought it was just such a good move. And it was not. It was not at all. But yeah, I like your theory. I think in talking it through with you now, effectively the Reece Walsh thing, I'm going to let Origin 3 decide it for me. I reckon if Queensland win and Walsh has an absolute throbbing game, I reckon I'll bring him in because I reckon
Yeah,
he'll.
let Queensland spirit consume you and then make your decision. And you'll come to the right decision, Brian,
Oh, shit.
because
Yeah.
we're Queenslanders. And that's what we do.
Yeah, we are. We're still Queenslanders, James. But yeah, I reckon that's a good
Still
play
Queenslanders,
because
yeah.
I do think that's a thing for guys like him and Latrell. Like we both said, like we were hanging on to Latrell because he just had that look in his eye and he was just taking hit ups out of nowhere. And and I think Walsh is a similar player. So yeah, I like that theory. I think if Queensland throb it, then he's in. If not, I'll go Turbo. I reckon it's decided. That's a good way to tie a bow on it. All right, guys, that's a wrap for this week. If you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend, all those kind of things. I hope everybody enjoys Origin on Wednesday night. I hope the person who enjoys it the most is William Slater for proving the idiots on the Magic Sponge wrong and just, he made all the right selection calls because, yeah, far out. I've never felt this way going into, I think when we've picked pretty dodgy teams in the past, like you look at 2020 and those kind of things, it's like, well, they're pretty dodgy, but it's kind of the best we've got. Like we don't really have that many other options. I think, Corey Allen was pretty much our only healthy fullback at times there. But yeah, I think the difference this time is that, I think we've got other guys as well. So it's a position that's a bit weird for us, but hopefully they can get it done, James. Big week ahead.
Yeah, I guess in terms of predictions from tonight, Brian, I am gonna back Billy in. In Billy, we trust. We said at the start of the year, don't throw the baby out the bathwater. Just back the guy in. Back the North Queensland spirit. Back the Queensland spirit in general. Think Queensland can get home in probably a relatively high scoring one. I think it'll be maybe like a 28-24 or 28-22 game because all the games so far have been fast, free flowing, high scoring, for different teams and different situations. But I think that's probably my prediction. I think who'll be man of the match. I'm going to go with Ben Hunt because my God, that guy just plays good footy in the 9 jersey every time he puts it on for Queensland. I'm seeing probably him playing big-ish minutes if Harry Grant is not quite there. And hopefully we can get the W on Wednesday night and go back to back to back in the Origin front. What are your predictions for the game, mate? What do you reckon we're going to win and how much by?
Yeah, mate. I think once again the rank outsiders Queensland probably get up, just backs against the wall, guys getting out of hospital beds. That's pretty much where it'll be. I'd say Queensland by, I think I've got to go close, maybe by 4. Queensland by 4. I think first try scorer will go my boy Hammer. And let's go all in on the Finns. Let's go man of the match Hammer. Hammer scores a triple. He scores 3 tries and he gets man of the match. Let's go with that.
Yeah, lock it in.
Like it. All right, guys. Up the mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.